So, welcome back. I'm Jake Whitwell, the host of this show, and you're listening to the Roundup by News of the Week. For those who haven't listened before, the Roundup is News of the Week's compilation of the key stories throughout the week, read out by me with some more explanation so more people can understand the news. This episode will kick off from the 16th of September, 2024, and we'll run until the Sunday because it's a full episode. Yay! Just a little bit late to upload. So, without further ado, I'll get on to the news now. And on Monday, I picked up 4 stories from BBC News about politics. The first noted the Conservatives have called for an inquiry into whether rules were broken by not declaring clothes and gifts by Starmer to his wife. Gifts from a Labour donor, like clothing and a personal shopper, were not declared on the MP's register of interests, and the PM has said it's very important that rules are followed, and that his team did reach out for advice over what to declare. The Conservative Shadow Minister for something, I didn't write it down, Andrew Griffith, has requested an investigation into the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner related to this. So he obviously feels there was wrongdoing there, while Starmer has said, it's important the rules are followed. The second reported on comments from Ed Davey, who has said he would like to see reforms to inheritance tax to ensure the better off pay more. When asked specifically about who would pay more, he said those who aren't inheriting huge amounts of money, or where valuable properties are inherited so there isn't as much money on top of the property being inherited, should pay less. He said that he hoped reforms would mean that those who are really wealthy could not use credible accountants to hide the money as well. He's not in power, so it's kind of easy for him to say stuff like that. And it was his party conference, so maybe we should give him some credit. The third observed Starmer has defended Sue Gray after reports of a rift in number 10. Ooh, that's loud. In the last few days, there have been rumours of fractures in Cabinet, with the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case and Labour Strategy Chief Morgan McSweeney. The rift was between them two. There have been stories of astronomical earnings going Miss Gray's way, all against the backdrop of her being given a job by Starmer while leading an investigation into the Tories over COVID. A senior government source has said that the claims are completely and utterly overblown, and that Miss Gray acts with nothing but professionalism at all times. The PM also commented, saying that all I can say about the stories is that most of them are wrong. The fourth covered a report which found that public inquiries into disasters take too long and do not lead to change. These public inquiries are supposed to allow for the government to learn from its mistakes and to avoid future tragedies. But Lord Norton, who has led the report, has basically said that lessons aren't being learnt if the recommendations are being ignored or if there are delays to getting those recommendations out. He added that delays and recommendations being ignored upset and insult families, victims, survivors, or those who are affected by the disasters, and some of the recommendations from his report on inquiries for disasters was a call for Parliament to establish a new committee which would hold the government to account on the implementation of decisions that come out of those reports or the implementation of those recommendations. The report argued that too often inquiries investigate too widely and are not clearly focused, again hampering the learning of lessons. And the government's response to this has been that it is absolutely committed to righting the wrongs of the past, and that it thanks the committee for the report and that it will consider the recommendations. I also picked up 3 stories from The Independent. One covered comments from the Home Secretary related to the Italian immigration plan. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, drew a distinction between Italy's immigration plan after comparisons have been drawn with the previous government's Rwanda plan. She said to BBC Breakfast that it's all very, very different from the Tories' plan. She said that the fact that there's oversight from the UNCHR and is a cooperation scheme between Italy and Albania makes it very different. Basically, the UNCHR or the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, is essentially the United Nations safeguarding body for the rights and well-being of refugees. So that gives it scrutiny. Italy's scheme of Albania, as well as other measures, has led to a reported 60% drop in arrivals by sea over the last year. Yvette Cooper has backed up Starmer's interest in the Italian scheme, adding that it's positive for the UK to work with governments that have different political views, as I can't remember her name now. I think it's Meloni. The Italian Prime Minister, Meloni, was elected on a bit more of a far-right platform than Keir Starmer was. The Labour Home Secretary reaffirmed the government's interests, telling the BBC there are 4 areas that the Italians have pursued, which she's interested in. This all comes after Keir Starmer himself has said there will be no more gimmicks to curb migration, so we can all watch and wait whether this becomes another gimmick. The second detail, that Lib Dem chief has been accused of using his role as an MP to boost his profile. The second detail, the Lib Dem chief has accused Farage of using his MP role to boost his profile. The Lib Dem chief whip, Wendy Chamberlain, commented on the recent revelations surrounding Farage's salary, which was a lot, and she said that his earnings at GB News, reportedly being significantly more than his earnings from being an MP, suggests where his true priorities lie. She drew on Farage's record in the EU Parliament, saying that he was doing more outside of it than he was in it, and she insinuated reform gives a voice and platform for those Southport rioters in a seemingly random critique at the Lib Dem party conference, not really relevant to their job as, well, scrutinisers of Labour's government. It's not like Reformer in power, but I'd mind to say that. The third stayed on the coverage of the Lib Dem conference. The Lib Dem leader has said care and the NHS will continue. I'm just going to move this over. I'm not looking as far off. Will continue to be the party's focus going with the budget, as they are vital to the economy. Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, pointed to waiting lists as a big issue, saying that there are too many people on waiting lists who want to work and then can't work because of the waiting lists. Sky News detailed climate action will be central to all foreign policy, according to David Lammy. The Foreign Secretary has said in his first speech that this is critical given the scale of the threat and also the size of the opportunity surrounding climate change. This centering of policy around the climate is part of a wider attempt by Starmer to put the UK back as a global leader on climate policy, which it was when the it was considered so when the UK hosted COP26. But has been watered down last year with Sunak's energy reforms, and you can read about them on the website at newsoftheweek.net. It'll be linked in wherever you're watching this video, and so you can scroll back and find that article when Sunak announced his reforms at the time. Obviously, stuff in there will be a little bit outdated now, but the premise will be the same. Moving on to American politics, ITV News reported the Secret Service has said the suspect had no line of sight on Trump. This is covering his assassination attempt. The acting director of the of the Secret Service has said that this was due to swift action being taken by security personnel. This comes as the suspect was charged, and investigators believed that at the time he had been there for 12 hours before being found. The suspect was never even close to getting a round off, according to the Secret Service. And on his political ideology, Brian Wesley Roof, I believe that's how it's pronounced, is believed to have had a mixed political history, having an extensive, as well as having an extensive social media history, and has a self-published book on his views of foreign affairs. So he's a politically active person, or was a politically active person. I think he's still alive. I don't think they shot him away. Sticking with American politics, The Guardian reported a judge has ruled RFK Jr. will remain on the ballot in swing state Wisconsin. A candidate's name cannot be removed from the ballot unless the candidate has died. Kennedy has suspended his campaign and has not died, so he won't be removed from the ballot. But he has endorsed Donald Trump, and keeping his name on the ballot won't help Trump's election attempt, because it could lead to confusion and take votes away from Trump. Kennedy has appealed the result, and Kennedy's appealed the result, and Wisconsin is usually a swing state, so that makes sense that he's appealed it, because it could be make or break for Trump's election campaign. In miscellaneous news on Monday, The Independent noted junior doctors in England have voted to accept a government pay offer. The deal will bring about pay rises worth around 22.3% on average across 2 years, which is well above the current inflation rate. Those who felt this has not done enough to make up for the real terms pay cuts owing to inflation being higher than pay rises for an extended period of time were in the minority, with 66% of those balloted voting in favour of the deal. A co-chair of the Junior Doctors Committee has said that this deal marks the beginning of 15 years, at the beginning of the end of 15 years of pay erosion, but that there was still a long way to go, since doctors are 20.8% behind in real terms than when they were in 2008, and those were his words. Wes Streeton, the Health Secretary, has said that I am pleased that the offer has been accepted, ending the strikes ahead of looming winter pressures on the NHS. In global news, Sky News detailed Germany's expanded border checks to cover all 9 of its neighbours following irregular migration. That step has been taken to crack down on such migration, on those A step has been taken to crack down on that irregular migration and to guard against terrorist threats as a result. The expansion comes a month after the deaths of 3 people by a stabbing, which was blamed on a Syrian asylum seeker who shared the ideology of the Islamic State group. Naturally, the incidents and others like it sparked renewed vigour into the debate around immigration policy, as it has done here in the UK with the Southport riots. The Independent covered a typhoon which hit China. Typhoon Bebinka, I think, could be pronouncing that wrong. It was the strongest to hit the country in 75 years, and it weakened after making landfall, but did bring excessive rain. The typhoon brought wind speeds of 151 kilometers per hour. It brought the city, I think it was, to a standstill, with over 4,000 people evacuated and reports of one elderly man being injured by a tree. There were no deaths at the time in connection to the typhoon, so that's a positive. But it did bring quite a devastating series of events for the city on that day. The Times detailed EU asylum applications are projected to reach 1 million for the second year in a row, and these figures are broadly the same as they were last year, but there are some key regional differences, with Germany receiving over 1/5 fewer, while Italy received a third more, for example. So that concludes the news on Monday. On Tuesday, in politics, there were 2 stories from The Independent. The first detailed the Welsh First Minister has promised to tackle NHS waiting lists. Eleanor Morgan, the new First Minister, set out her policies this week ahead of Welsh parliamentary elections in 2026. She said she will cut waiting times, transform public transport, create green jobs and drive growth. It should be noted that no timelines were set when she announced the policy focuses, but she did say that a more comprehensive list is promised for this coming week at the time of release, so lucky you. The second noted Ros Savage, a record-breaking rower turned MP, has expressed her grief and shame at the state of the country's waterways. She has urged her party to go further on sewage policy and has backed proposals for a clean water authority, which would scrutinise government policy, and has backed proposals for a clean water authority or the disposal of sewage water. These proposals would replace Ofwat and would have power to set legally binding targets to prevent sewage discharges by 2030. The Lib Dem MP has said this at party conference and was talking about water and sewage companies in the main. There are also 2 stories from Sky News. The first observed plans for gender quotas in the Welsh Parliament have been scrapped. These quotas were intended to be introduced in May 2026, but they were delayed to 2030 in July, and now they have been shelved. However, that could bring about legal challenges with some in because there are reportedly people in the Welsh Government who want that policy put through, so they could still try and vote on a motion for it, is what the article was saying. The second reported ministers have stepped up their bid to reform workers' rights, and this is coming in the form of meetings between Angela Rayner, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, Justin Madders, the Employment Rights Minister, and business groups like CBI or the FSB. Officials from the unions like the TUC and Unite will also be represented, along with other unions. So it's a big, talk about this policy, which would sort of expand rights to workers related to work from home and stuff like that. But work from home, I think it's the 4-day week as well, and there were loads of others. ITV News covered the early release schemes, with Starmer saying he was angry when he saw photos of ex-prisoners toasting at their release. He drew on his previous prosecuting experience and said that releasing people who should be in prison made him angry because he knows they should be in prison. Funny that. He also called it a pretty simple choice since prisons were so full, and blamed the previous government, or the previous Conservative government, and Rishi Sunak for their delay in dealing with the crisis, reportedly, or according to him, making it worse. Times reported Labour are enforcing the 3-day week for civil servants. Labour are ignoring rules surrounding working from home for civil servants, aiming to give staff more flexibility. So they're not enforcing they have to be in 3 days a week, not that they're ignoring it and forcing them in or anything like that. As part of this, ministers are said to be less dogmatic, with basically forcing in-office working no longer being a priority. Business groups are divided on the issue, with some saying increased work from home could boost productivity, and with others believing that work from home creates laziness and is otherwise not good for the workforce. That's a really, really divisive issue. Obviously, the government, with their work from home policy for the civil service and their workers' rights reforms, believe that work from home is not a bad thing for the economy, or they wouldn't be doing it. The Telegraph detailed a Lib Dem activist has been arrested for squeezing a woman's bum at the party conference. Quickly tired of reading these sort of stories. Anyway, the 57-year-old man was arrested after he allegedly assaulted the woman at a glee club the Liberal Democrat activists were attending. Party officials said that they were aware of the issue and had offered support to both the police and the woman. Sarah Davey, the deputy leader, said that he was horrified that this happened, with the man in question now being suspended. And this comes amid other scandals surrounding sexual assault in recent years, with the phrase pest minister scandal being thrown around more recently. That's a cross-party issue. It's a real sleaze issue in politics. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said that climate change is a bigger threat than terrorism. To show this, he announced plans to help create a global clean air alliance, which I've little detail on, but it seems to be a scrutiny body over the levels of clean air and emissions and things like that. This claims after he pledged to put climate policy at the centre of immigration earlier this week and also last week in an episode that was never released. In missed news for Tuesday, the Evening Standard noted universities have said tuition fees must go up. Tuition fees, which have been capped since 2017, have been called into question by universities who believe that they need to be increased in line with inflation. This is in order to deal with the sector's growing financial problems, and Universities UK, body representing 141 universities around the country, have called for this, as well as increases in wages, grants to the poorest student, and higher maintenance loans, as well as greater access to mental health services for students. There's a whole range of issues. This was just the one picked out by the Evening Standard. The Telegraph detailed junior lawyers have been told not to say falling on deaf ears due to the fears it could offend clients who are hard of hearing. This comes after the University of Law has uploaded an online guideline cautioning students of non-inclusive language. Other words in the handbook were housewife, manpower, policeman, and hysterical. This is in a similar vein to the UCL in London telling students to avoid the term vulnerable, suggesting it could disempower people. Reuters has reported on comments from Bill Gates on malnutrition. Mr. Gates has said climate change will make the effects of malnutrition more widespread and more severe. The report published by Mr. Gates' foundation has said that between now and 2050, 40 million more children will have stunted growth and 28 million will suffer from wasting, an irreversible form of malnutrition. The Guardian has detailed the global cost of failing to invest in women and gender equality is 10 trillion a year. A new UN report has found governments are failing to capitalise on investment in women and girls, missing out on millions in economic gain in the process. The global cost of failing to properly educate women and girls is worth 10 trillion, with the report professing there will be a huge loss in lower middle income countries more so than high-income countries. That support for female farmers could add up to 1 trillion to the global GDP, and found that at their current rates, child marriage could continue until 2092. The UN's head of women's research and data said that the cost of not achieving gender equality, as well as the potential of the returns of not doing so, were too high to ignore. In global news, the Evening Standard noted NATO should put Ukraine in the best possible situation, according to Starmer. Starmer reiterated his support for Ukraine's right to defend itself, with this being an illegal war and one started by Russia. Other than that, he avoided the question, not directly talking about or speaking on the use of missiles in Russia, which tells you a lot about the situation. BBC News noted Israel has set its new war goal of returning residents to the north. The Israeli PM's office has said that it is now an official war goal to make the safe return of residents to the north. Around 60,000 people have been evacuated from northern Israel due to attacks by AFP News detailed a UN chief has condemned the collective punishment of Palestinians. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has criticised the Israelis' handling of the war. The level of suffering in Gaza, the level of deaths and destruction has no parallel in everything he's witnessed since becoming Secretary General. He has led the organisation since 2017. And he's also condemned the terror attacks made by Hamas, along with their taking of hostages, as an absolute violation of humanitarian law. However, he has said that does not justify the collective punishment of Palestinian people. I'll say that seems like most people's opinion on the matter, not to step on any toes. On Wednesday, in politics, the Evening Standard noted Labour has been urged to honour a £15 million Tory pledge to feed the vulnerable with excess farm foods. After a successful campaign ran by the Evening Standard in conjunction with the UK's two largest food distribution charities, Sunak, the previous PM, announced the Farmgate Food Waste Fund in February. That is a mouthful. The fund was supposed to provide 15 million to help tackle the 3 million tonnes of edible produce which goes to waste each year on UK farms. Often, some of that produce is rejected by the supermarket chains or because of labour shortages. And the money which would have rescued around 28,000 tonnes of food and pay for itself, delivering 100 million in societal returns, may fall away, with Rachel Reeves effectively chomping at the bit to make savings to fill the mystical £22 billion black hole. The Guardian detailed more than 100 ex-Republicans have called Trump unfit to serve, simultaneously endorsing Harris. These representatives have said and done this in a letter. They said in said letter that we believe the POTUS, President of the United States, must be principled, serious, and a steady leader. They said they expect to disagree with Harris on policy issues, but that they believe she possesses essential qualities needed to serve as president. Obviously, believing Trump doesn't. BBC News observed that a major US union has declined to endorse either Trump or Biden. This would be the first time since 1996 the International Brotherhood of Teamsters has not endorsed a candidate. The union of about 1.3 million members has said that internal polling has found no definitive support for either candidate, and even though two of its most recent polls came out for Trump. LBC detailed James Cleverly has branded Labour's treatment of Rwanda disgusting, and that he should bring back the controversial scheme. That he could personally bring back the controversial scheme should he become party leader and then win an election. The Conservative leadership hopeful has said Labour's actions are grossly unprofessional and said that he would not have treated a European partner this way or in that way. In the interview, he admitted to making mistakes during the election and said that he could bring back the scheme as he believes an effective deterrent is needed to curb illegal migration. The Times has covered the Tory leadership race, or stuck on that, with there being a poor turnout with just 1 in 3 party members voting. The article doesn't say in the headline, possibly to get more people to read it, but talks specifically about the Scottish leadership race. So far up there, only 2,400 members have voted, a third of members. This being a third of members with only a week in the contest left to go. In miscellaneous news, the Telegraph reported a free speech group was kicked out of a Brighton pub after saying trans kids shouldn't be taught trans ideology. The group said 50 members were forced to leave a pub in Brighton, with the landlord apparently disapproving of their views, and that seems obvious to me considering they were kicked out. In global news, the Evening Standard covered wildfires in Portugal, with a state of calamity being issued. It's weird. I never heard of state of calamity before this. Thought it was a state of emergency. Anyway, more than 100 wildfires have ripped through Portugal, killing 7 people, and the police have arrested a further 7 people in connection with the fires, with senior officials saying that the difficult hours are not over yet. The Guardian noted a blast from an attack on a Russian arms depot was picked up on an earthquake monitor. The attack itself was more than 300 miles north of Ukraine and was one of the biggest strikes on Russia's military arsenal since the war began. Videos emerged on social media of high-rising flames and detonations thundering across a lake. On Thursday, in politics, BBC News observed Starmer has said, "I'm in control," after the wage of Chief of Staff Sue Gray was leaked. That leak showed that Sue Gray now earns more than the Prime Minister. Naturally, this spread rumours of a fractured relationship within government. Despite this, the PM focused on Labour's mandate, saying, I'm very focused every day, and the same message from me to the team, and the message from me to the team is exactly the same, which is we have to deliver. He said that we're elected on a big mandate to deliver change, and that he is determined they will do that. Obviously, skipping the question a little bit, I mean, he can't say much on that leak. because it might well be true. The Independent detailed Nigel Farage has relinquished control of Reform UK ahead of its party conference. Farage is giving up his control in Reform as well as his majority shareholder position. Farage has said he will change the structure of the party from one limited by shares to one limited by guarantee. Essentially, this means that the members will own the party. The Reform Party branded its conference the most exciting of all political conferences this year, with membership figures rising fourfold from the last year. The Evening Standard detailed Starmer has said concerns over immigration and deprivation are no excuse for riots. The PM has said, I'm not prepared to give an inch of an excuse. He acknowledged that there is deprivation and concern over migration, but cautioned that these concerns should be settled democratically. On energy, Sky News noted a report has warned that the West still relies on Russian nuclear power, which shields it from further sanctions. The annual World Nuclear Industry Status Report that's also a mouthful, but found significant interdependence between Russia and Europe on nuclear energy, which is protecting them from future sanctions. And the report added removing this dependence will likely increase energy costs for ordinary people. In miscellaneous news, Sky News covered comments from the former scientific director at OceanGate, which revealed Titan submersible malfunctioned days before the now infamous and fatal dive. The malfunction caused passengers to tumble around and rock, but it took them an hour to get out of the water in that instance. BBC News detailed private patient numbers have doubled amid troubles. The article, although not mentioned in the headline, was talking about the figure in Wales and specifically private records. New figures have shown 8,000 admissions to Welsh private hospitals in the first 3 months of 2024, according to the private healthcare network. 5 years ago, in the same period, the figure was just under 4,500, and this is amid high waiting lists and a series of economic issues rocking the service in Wales and in the UK more broadly. The Times noted Next has warned of store closures after an equal pay ruling. The company has said that the ruling will cost around 30 million and could impact whether stores were individually profitable. The legal challenge was involving 3,540 current and former staff at high street stores who were predominantly women, being paid less than warehouse workers who were predominantly male. The gist of the court case is that if they found that there shouldn't be a pay disparity in between those two different professions, and the retailer is appealing against the ruling and has said it is very confident of its grounds for appeal. In global news, Sky News covered the Israel-Hezbollah situation, with the UK Foreign Secretary calling for an immediate ceasefire. On Friday, political news, there were two stories from the Evening Standard featured. One covered the Reform UK conference. Farage, who has close relations with Trump and has flew there since his election in July, commented on the possibility of a worsened UK-USA relationship after the Labour government were elected. He cited the fact that the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said some pretty unpleasant things about Donald Trump, according to him. If Trump wins, it doesn't put us in a great place. And the Reform UK MP for Clacton then said Harris has a history with the far left and compared her to Keir Starmer, saying that he is now governing on the left of what he was elected on. It's hard to say, really. The second detail, a minister has warned nationalising auto firms could cost the taxpayer £99 billion, with the government having no intention of doing it, considering that cost. All political parties put penalties on auto companies, whether it's special measures, making them for public benefit, restricting them at the point of criminal breaches, or nationalising them altogether in their manifesto. The 99 billion figure is based on Ofwat's Capital View for 2024 figures. They're a bit technical, but yeah, basically Labour aren't planning on nationalising auto companies according to this due to the high price tag. There were two stories from the Times as well. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has said he's reluctant to force a ban on smoking in pub gardens, saying that he will not impose one unless voters want it. Mr Streeting has said that he wanted a genuine national conversation surrounding the issue, and I don't know, it's all a bit confused. I can't really see that working or being effective because not many people are open to a national conversation when it comes to government control, restricting their rights, if you want to look at it like that. Although as a public health issue, obviously, it is bad. So it's all a bit messy. The second reported on comments from Robert Jemrick, who has said that the English identity is fraying. Jemrick said the combination of migration and animosity for British identity has created huge problems, clarifying the influx of migrants has put pressure on roads, GPs and schools while not making the country any richer. This comes as legal migration has skyrocketed in recent years, with illegal migration being a bone of contention within the country more recently. The former immigration minister said Labour should ignore voters at their own peril. LBC detailed Angela Rayner has vowed to make irreversible changes in a devolution revolution. I don't say revolution like that. For Northern England, the Deputy PM has pledged to deliver further devolution across the whole of north of England to ensure it is not dictated to by Whitehall. I'm assuming this would look like mayors, although I don't know. In miscellaneous news, BBC News noted a lorry fire has caused a 10-mile jam on the M25. And I come from near there. I've been on that road several times, and that's not news really. That happens all the time. I'm kidding. It's not usually that bad, but the delays there are perfectly normal. LBC detailed a Hollywood actor has been freed, who was freed from jail under the early release scheme, was then put back behind bars 48 hours later. Jason Hoganson, I think I'm pronouncing that right, 53, was released on the 10th and was back in prison on the 11th, 24 hours later, after being arrested in Newcastle's West End. He was arrested on 2 counts of breaching a restraining order and 1 count of assault. He is not supposed to be said to be the only one making a quick return to prison, with several others understood to be going back to prison very swiftly after being released. This is amid warnings of higher rates of reoffending when there aren't proper systems in place. It was all happening in the last 2 weeks. There's been charities and campaigners being like, oh, we need to put more systems in place to properly rehabilitate those being released so this doesn't happen, and it's happened. Anyway, the Evening Standard reported MPs have been told RAAC hospitals will go ahead. Basically, I think I missed some words, but RAAC is a type of concrete, if you don't know, and it crumbles and is quite dangerous. It was built because it was cheap and it was needed, if you like. Anyway, there were ongoing reforms. Basically, those reforms are still going on despite a spending review. This was in a letter sent to MPs by Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, who has said the 7 hospitals built with RSA concrete will not be subjected or hindered in this spending review. So I'm assuming they're going to get refurbished and, amended, so there's no RAAC concrete in the building anymore. In global news on Friday, The Independent detailed comments from the freed Russian dissident Vladimir Kara-Murza, I think I'm pronouncing that right. His comments were that Putin's downfall is inevitable, and this was an exclusive interview from The Independent, so I will link the article in the description of the episode wherever you're watching it or wherever possible, as I feel The Independent does a good job of reporting on Kara-Murza's words, which doesn't always happen in the media, but it is this time, so or at least a better job than I can do of it. So in any case, his argument was basically that Putin's downfall is inevitable, as it is, and was centred around the strength of opposition to Putin. He cited the young generation who are growing up seeing the atrocities of the war in some cases, and people marching at funerals for political opposition like Alexei Navalny in Moscow earlier this year, show how strong the support is and that he is confident that eventual downfall will happen, even if he's not alive to see it. Reuters reported that a source has said Germany has stopped approving war weapons exports to Israel, and a close source to the ministry has said that it has stopped work on approving export licenses for arms to Israel due to the country's legal and political challenges in relation to the war with Gaza. For the country, the German government, however, has commented on the report and said there is no German arms boycott to Israel. Politico has said US officials are expecting significant escalations between Israel and Hezbollah. This comes after American officials have long said that both sides want to avoid war, but the latest analysis from the Biden administration is that it will be difficult for both sides to de-escalate. Importantly, officials within the NSC, the National Security Council, have said that they still believe there is time and space for a diplomat. On Saturday, in political news, The Telegraph noted the government has reportedly been told that some cities and boroughs do not have the capacity for students in the state sector who could be displaced due to the cuts. Some places, more than others, specifically Bristol, Salford, and the London boroughs of Richmond upon Thames and Camden, are particularly vulnerable to the change. And the information sent to the Education Minister cited the haste of the policy and it being taken place in the school year as factors which would add to the cost on the taxpayer and make it less likely parents are given their preferred choice for their schools for their kids. LBC detailed Starmer has warned we are not going down the route of austerity. Citing the damage of austerity, Starmer has said that it's not the route he wants to go down. BBC News reported Trump has rejected a second TV debate, saying it is too late since voting has already started. He's very, very loosely correct. It's not as if voters are going out en masse in most places, with early voting of that kind only going on in Virginia so far. Minnesota and South Dakota, however, voters have started just dropping off absentee ballots, which is where which is an alternative to mail-in ballots if they aren't going to be there on the actual day of the election. Trump's decision has been criticised as it could leave people uneducated before voting, with the Harris-Walz campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, saying that it would be an unprecedented in modern history for there to be just one election debate. Of course, there's already been one with Biden, but he's since stepped down, so realistically now should be another one with Harris, because they're the two options they're the two options most people are going to have in the US presidential race. In miscellaneous news, The Guardian noted people in the UK are washing their clothes too often, according to a new major laundry brand. eCover, who I'm going to be honest I haven't heard of, for The Guardian to be calling them a major laundry brand, are publishing a report on the impact of laundry on the environment in partnership with Falmouth Uni, which is close to where I used to live, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, in their study of 2,000 British people, they found 18% believed that washing less frequently would not affect the planet, with 1 in 10 feeling the pressure to wash their clothes more often. These figures reveal that the average household is responsible for 260 wash loads a year, when detergents contain multiple pollutants which pose risk to flora and fauna. And synthetic fabrics are responsible for 8% of the microplastic in the water. This obviously could be considered an issue, justifying that message from eCover. Sky News covered the ban of zombie knives with the mother of teenager Tamin Habimana. I could be pronounced that wrong. I really, really mean no disrespect. Who has said that zombie knives are only part of the issue. She has said she feels disrespected when politicians and the media, only talk of zombie knife bans, since any weapon can kill. In fact, it's her belief that this should be extended to a ban on all weapons, because her son was killed not using a zombie knife, but just a normal knife, I think. In global news, Sky News detailed a fire has ripped through an arms depot inside Russia after a huge Ukrainian drone attack. This comes amid concerns of Putin attacking nuclear facilities and Zelensky's plans to discuss a victory plan with Biden next week. This strike has led to evacuations of at least 1,200 people, and there were no immediate reported casualties. Now, I don't know whether this is actually different strikes to one earlier on in the week. My expertise, they use the word loosely, isn't in global news with the Ukraine and Russia war. It could be another strike, and I don't know. It's from another provider, so it's from Sky News, and the other one wasn't from Sky News, so do some more reading on that if you're interested. And that concludes the news on Saturday. On Sunday in politics, I picked up 3 stories from the Evening Standard. The first reported on a joke made by Wes Streeting. This is a bit weird, but he remarked sarcastically that Sue Gray shot JFK and that no one should be earning more than the PM. Maybe I'm missing some of the context, but it doesn't seem funny to me at all. I mean, even for a politics joke, and I'm a politics student, I like it, I'm interested in it, and it's not funny. But anyway, apparently it's newsworthy, according to the Evening Standard. The second covered comments from Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. I then put Bridget Phillipson again. Anyway, she is currently trying to pass legislation which would increase private school fees. As I said, she doesn't accept that some private schools may retract bursaries or access to facilities in order to offset the cost. She said that changes to VAT laws should not impact work private schools are doing in bursaries and scholarships, as well as sports facilities and other things. Staying close to politics jokes, unfortunately, Labour's outgoing General Secretary David Evans has said the Labour spent too much time gaggling on the ground and not enough time forming the magnificent V formation associated with a team of geese. So I'm guessing this is just a metaphor rather than a joke, but he basically wished for MPs to stay united and keep shape. Brilliant. That's such a long-winded way to say that. I also picked up two stories from the Telegraph. One detailed the Attorney General has said that the government must be militant about human rights. And this was basically the Attorney General saying that the party should stick firm on human rights legislation as it had done under Blair amid attempts by the Conservatives in their last government to water down rights in order to pass their Rwanda plan. He also said that in the wake of rising populism with Reform UK, the Labour Party should popularise human rights legislation. I have no idea how he thinks this should be done. I also disagree that the issue of the reform movement is about the erosion of human rights. I think the reform movement and the stuff related to human rights are not mutually exclusive, but that's just me. More alarmingly, if that's possible, Darren Jones, Labour's Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has said he wanted the party to become a natural party of government and win as many as 5 general elections in a row. He said he wants to make Labour the change makers, akin to how we consider Attlee or Blair, and for those who don't know, they are prominent prime ministers of the past. It should be noted, by the way, that neither of those were in power for 25 years. Attlee was in power for 6 years, and Blair was in for 13. Even Thatcher, who is recognised by most as a change maker for her policies, was only in power for 11 years, with followed by 7 years of major tacked onto the end of her policy. So that's in total 18 years of Conservative rule. When put into comparison, his claims then seem bizarre, or his ambitions then seem bizarre, especially considering the vote share at the last general election, which painted the picture of a fragmented vote, not necessarily one where Labour was absolutely authoritatively winning and coming out woo. Sky News reported on claims from Ruth Davidson that Starmer should fire those behind the Sue Gray leaks. The former leader of the Scottish Conservatives said that there were political advisers. They must be reminded that journalists are not their friends. LBC detailed comments from Diane Abbott that a new austerity drive will increase racism. She said that after Starmer has said there will be no new austerity drive. In any case, she said that a combination of the new war drive and the new austerity drive will mean black and Asian and Muslim people will bear the brunt of government attacks. In miscellaneous news, The Guardian reported dozens of arrests have been made in the UK after a crackdown against gangs exploiting the Irish border. More than 30 people have been arrested, and this was part of Labour's plan to deal with people smuggling gangs. Sky News noted that 700 migrants have crossed the channel in small boats on Saturday, bringing the total to 24,335 for the year so far, which is up from last year but down from in 2020. In global news, Reuters noted sources have said Iran had supplied Russia with missiles but no launchers. Seemed weird. But Reuters didn't make it clear why Iran didn't send the launchers, or maybe they didn't know. And that makes it hard to know whether or when the missiles will be operational. The second story from Reuters detailed Iran has arrested 12 people for collaborating with Israel, according to Revolutionary Guards. And that's pretty much all the article had to say on the matter. So that concludes this episode of News of the Week. Thank you for watching or listening or doing whatever you want to do with it. Please comment with any suggestions or any improvements I could make, or just maybe your opinion on some of the stories, because this week some of them were a little bit ridiculous and some of the others were quite heavy. Please like this and subscribe or share to people that maybe you think would want to know more about politics or the news, or maybe share it with some people that don't, maybe your co-workers, your friends or your family, because that would greatly help me and hopefully help you in understanding more about current affairs and politics. Thank you for listening or watching. Goodbye and have a good week.